Okay? The Grand Pyramid of Giza is made of 2,300,000 stones. 2,300,000 stones. It stands at 481 feet of altitude. Its base is 13 square acres. 13 square acres. That is extremely large. When you take survey picture, satellite picture of the apex of the Grand Pyramid at Giza, it is 1/4 of an inch off the center of the base. That's 13 square acres. 13 acres square. 1/4 of an inch off center. That's after placing 2,300,000 stones that you have cut with copper tools.
If the universe is expanding, then in the past it was smaller. Ultimately, in the distant past, it was infinitely small, a primeval atom or cosmic egg.
In his book, The Creation, Dr. Atkins struggles mightily to explain how the universe could come into existence uncaused out of nothing. But in the end, he finds himself trapped in self-contradiction. He states, now we go back in time beyond the moment of creation to when there was no time and to where there was no space. At this time before time, he imagines a swirling dust of mathematical points which recombine again and again and again, and finally come by trial and error to form our space-time universe. Now, it needs to be honestly said that this is not a scientific hypothesis. It is pop metaphysics, and of the worst kind, for it's obviously self-contradictory, since it assumes time and space in order to explain the origin of time and space. As the scientist David Park writes, it is deceptively easy to imagine events before the Big Bang, but in physics, there is no way to make sense of these imaginings. As if this were not bad enough, Dr. Atkins compounds the problem by asking where the mathematical points came from. His answer? Time brought the points into being, and the points brought time into being. This is like saying the chicken brought the egg into being, and the egg brought the chicken into being. It's no wonder that in his review of Dr. Atkins' book in the Times Literary Supplement, the philosopher John Leslie asks incredulously, how could such nonsense have been churned out by the author of a superb textbook like physical chemistry? In fact, Dr. Atkins' Oxford University colleague, Keith Ward, in his book, God, Chance, and Necessity, points out no less than 7 such logical fallacies in Dr. Atkins' scenario. Ward concludes that it is, quote, blatantly self-contradictory and so cannot be true.
So, right off the bat, what's wrong with, in your opinion, with believing in a God, regardless of who the God is?
I think it's false. I think that it's a matter of belief without evidence, and as a scientist and as an educator, I like the idea that we believe things because there's evidence. There's such a lot of evidence available now at the beginning of the 21st century that it's a real shame, it's a tragedy to base your life upon something for which there is no evidence and never was any evidence, when the real truth is so wonderful.
Well, I suspect that the argument they would make is that because it's absurd, that's why it's faith. Right, that if it was evidentiary, you would require no faith and it would be fact, and that would be missing the point of religion.
That's absolutely right, but that's not a point in its favor, is it?
Well, you know, it's whatever gets you through the night, isn't it, ultimately?
Well, no, I mean, for me, what matters is the truth.
The scientific truth.
What other truth is there when we're talking about the universe, when we're talking about the nature of life? Of course, there are other sorts of truths like moral truths, or maybe they're not truths at all, but they're not scientific. But I think if we're talking about the universe, about what reality is, about what life is, then truth means scientific.
During the last 30 years or so, scientists have discovered that the existence of intelligent life depends upon a delicate and complex balance of initial conditions simply given in the Big Bang itself. We now know that life-prohibiting universes are vastly more probable than any life-permitting universe like ours. How much more probable? The answer is that the chances that the universe should be life-permitting are so infinitesimal as to be incalculable and incomprehensible. For example, Stephen Hawking has estimated that if the rate of the universe's expansion had been smaller by even 1 part in 100,000 million, the universe would have recollapsed into a hot fireball. Brandon Carter has calculated that the odds against the initial conditions being suitable for later star formation, without which planets could not exist, is 1 followed by 1,000 billion zeros, at least. P.C.W. Davies estimates that a change in the strength of gravity or of the weak force by only 1 part in 10 to the 100th power would have prevented a life-permitting universe. There are around 50 such quantities and constants present in the Big Bang which must be fine-tuned in this way if the universe is to permit life.
You find that this argument of design is so conspicuous, it's staring and glaring in one's nose, yet you simply say, well, this is just to be discarded as just a mere existence of some primordial soup that came into existence out of nothing with nothing, by nothing, through total probabilistic game, which is absolutely impossible from all standards of logic and reason, as we would say. So the interesting fact is that yes, reason is a necessary entity, but something that is so prevalent, that is so clear about the system of design in the universe, and to reject it and simply say that it has no purpose, no design, no meaning, it just came out of nothing, going nowhere, with no meaning, I think that is really stretching the issue way beyond reason. It becomes totally unreasonable.
I would like to come back to an earlier point, if I may, too, and that is the notion that atheists are somehow the intelligentsia among us and so forth. I think this is just completely false. The spate of new books published by the new atheists like Harris and Hitchens and Dawkins and so forth are not sophisticated books intellectually. These are, for the most part, angry, bitter diatribes against religion. And while someone like Dawkins may be a good scientist in his field, when he begins to talk about philosophy and theology, he is merely a layman. And The God Delusion is a very unsophisticated book intellectually. As a philosopher, I was just appalled at the arguments he gives in that book. It is an embarrassment, really, I think.
Well, I can agree, and I suspect Michael may as well.
I think you would too.
If you look at the reviews, this man is respected in his field.
Yes.
But this book, if you look at the reviews, they're quite damning. I used to work with Chris Hitchens. He's a bright guy. He's a fun guy. This is not a profound book. It's a fun book in many ways. So I think most people would agree that the three you mentioned in particular, Dawkins, Harris, and Hitchens, what they've written is not first-class scholarship.
This has been pointed out by Frank Tipler and John Barrow in their book, The Anthropic Cosmological Principle. They list 10 steps in the evolution of Homo sapiens, each of which is so improbable that before it would have occurred by chance alone, the sun would have ceased to be a main sequence star and incinerated the Earth. They estimate the evolution of the human genome, the odds of this are somewhere between 4 to the negative 180th power to the 110,000th power, and 4 to the negative 360th power to the 110,000th power. So if evolution did occur, it would literally be a miracle. and therefore evidence for the existence of God.